The crystal chandelier cast golden light across the ballroom as champagne glasses clinked in celebration of my husband's $6.4 billion acquisition deal. David stood at the podium, his smile radiant as Henderson Industries executives applauded his achievement. I watched from my table, 8 months pregnant, when his mother Patricia nodded toward his mistress Sophia. Without warning, Sophia approached and dumped an entire glass of red wine across my swollen belly. The crowd gasped as the burgundy liquid soaked through my white maternity dress. Patricia leaned close and whispered, "Endure this like a good wife." I calmly pulled out my phone, tapped once, and murmured, "I own the buyer." David's face drained of all color as he stammered, "What did you do?" I simply smiled, knowing I had just frozen the entire deal. Nobody in that ballroom knew the truth about who I really was. For the past 8 years, I had been living a double life that would have shocked every person celebrating David's supposed triumph. My name is Anna, and I am the anonymous founder and owner of Meridian Capital, the very company that was supposed to acquire Henderson Industries. In that $6.4 billion deal David had been bragging about all evening. When I was 24, I inherited a substantial trust fund from my father, who had been a brilliant venture capitalist before his sudden death in a car accident. Instead of living off the money like most people expected, I used every penny to build something extraordinary. I started Meridian Capital from a tiny office in Boston, working 16-hour days while pursuing my MBA at MIT. I deliberately kept my identity hidden behind layers of corporate structures and legal entities, using the name of my deceased grandmother as the primary shareholder. Building Meridian required sacrifice and strategy that nobody could have imagined. I assembled a team of brilliant executives who believed they were working for a reclusive European investor. I made deals worth hundreds of millions while my husband thought I was simply a part-time consultant for small businesses. Every acquisition, every merger, every strategic decision flowed through my careful planning, yet David never suspected that his supposedly unemployed wife controlled one of the most powerful private equity firms on the East Coast. The irony was delicious and painful simultaneously. David worked as a senior vice president at Henderson Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company that had been struggling financially for 3 years. He came home every night complaining about incompetent leadership and missed opportunities, never knowing that I had been quietly positioning Meridian to acquire his company when the timing was perfect. 3 months ago, I discovered David's affair in the most mundane way possible. His credit card statement showed charges at expensive restaurants and hotels on days when he claimed to be working late or traveling for business conferences. When I hired a private investigator, the truth became crystal clear. David had been seeing Sophia Martinez, a 26-year-old marketing coordinator at Henderson, for almost 6 months. But the betrayal cut deeper than simple adultery. As I watched them together through surveillance photos, I realized David had been sharing confidential company information with Sophia during their romantic encounters. He was discussing Henderson's financial struggles, upcoming layoffs, and potential acquisition targets while she recorded everything on her phone. The woman was not just his mistress. She was gathering corporate intelligence for reasons I had yet to understand. Patricia, David's mother, had always treated me like an unwelcome intruder in their family. Despite my MIT education and my father's successful business background, she constantly implied that I was a gold digger who had trapped her son into marriage. She made snide comments about my appearance, my cooking, my inability to give David children quickly enough. When I finally became pregnant after 2 years of trying, she actually seemed disappointed rather than excited about her first grandchild. The wine incident tonight was not spontaneous. I had been watching Patricia and Sophia exchange meaningful glances throughout the evening. They had planned this humiliation as some twisted celebration of David's professional success. Patricia wanted to remind me of my place in their family hierarchy, while Sophia wanted to assert her dominance as the woman who truly understood David's ambitions. What neither of them realized was that I had orchestrated this entire acquisition specifically to create this moment. For 3 months, I had been maneuvering Meridian Capital into position to buy Henderson Industries, knowing that David would be chosen to negotiate the deal. I wanted to watch him celebrate his greatest professional achievement before I revealed that his wife had been controlling his destiny all along. The frozen deal was just the beginning. With one tap on my phone, I had sent a secure message to my chief operating officer instructing him to halt all negotiations indefinitely. Henderson Industries would receive a formal notice tomorrow morning stating that Meridian Capital was reconsidering the acquisition due to newly discovered irregularities in their corporate governance. David stood frozen at the podium, his celebration speech dying in his throat as he stared at me across the ballroom. The crowd began murmuring in confusion as news of the deal's suspension spread through the room. Patricia's triumphant smile faded as she realized something had gone terribly wrong. I stood slowly, wine still dripping from my dress, and walked toward the exit with my head held high. Tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin. The morning after the wine incident brought chaos that exceeded even my expectations. I woke to the sound of David pacing frantically in our kitchen, his phone pressed against his ear as he desperately tried to reach someone at Meridian Capital. His voice cracked with panic as he left his 7th voicemail message for executives who would never return his calls. "This makes no sense," he muttered, running his hands through his hair. "Yesterday, everything was perfect. The contracts were ready for signing. Now they won't even acknowledge that I exist." I sipped my herbal tea and watched him unravel, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Part of me still loved the man I had married 5 years ago, but that man had been replaced by someone who could betray me so completely while living in my house and sharing my bed. Henderson Industries CEO Marcus Thompson had been calling David every 20 minutes since 6 in the morning. The company's stock price had already dropped 12% in pre-market trading as word of the deal's suspension leaked to financial journalists. Marcus was facing questions from the board of directors that David could not answer. "Anna," David said, finally acknowledging my presence. "Something strange happened last night after you left. The Meridian people just disappeared. Nobody will talk to me." "That does sound unusual," I replied, maintaining the concerned wife facade I had perfected over months of planning. Maybe they discovered something about Henderson's finances that worried them. "Impossible," David snapped. "I've been managing this deal for 8 months. I know every detail of our financial situation. There's nothing that would make them pull out suddenly." What David didn't know was that my team at Meridian had been conducting their own investigation into Henderson Industries independent of anything David provided. We had discovered several accounting irregularities that David either missed or deliberately ignored. Henderson's management had been inflating revenue figures and hiding debt through creative bookkeeping that bordered on fraud. My pregnancy complications from the previous night's stress had forced me to call Dr. Williams for an emergency consultation. She assured me that the baby was healthy, but the elevated blood pressure and irregular heartbeat required immediate attention. The wine incident had been more than humiliation. It had been a physical assault on my unborn child. Patricia arrived at our house unannounced around noon, her face flushed with anger and confusion. She demanded to know if I had somehow sabotaged David's deal through my family connections. The accusation was both insulting and ironic, considering that my family connections were exactly what had created Meridian Capital in the first place. "I don't understand what you think I could have done," I told her calmly. "I'm just a pregnant woman who was humiliated at your son's celebration dinner." "Don't play innocent with me," Patricia hissed. "Your comment about owning the buyer company was very specific. What did you mean?" Before I could respond, David's brother Tony arrived from Seattle after catching the earliest morning flight. The airline had delayed his original trip, but news of the failed deal had prompted him to change his plans. Tony worked as a financial analyst for a major investment firm, and he immediately understood the severity of Henderson's situation.
"David, this is worse than you're telling us,"
Tony said after reviewing the preliminary reports.
"If Meridian Capital found serious problems with Henderson's books, other potential buyers will discover the same issues. You might be facing criminal charges if the SEC decides to investigate."
The brothers spent the afternoon locked in David's study, their voices rising and falling as they argued about damage control strategies. I could hear fragments of their conversation through the door. Tony was urging David to hire a criminal defense attorney immediately, while David insisted that everything would resolve itself once he could speak directly with Meridian's executives. Sophia had been conspicuously absent from all communication since the previous night. David had tried calling and texting her repeatedly, but she was not responding. Her sudden disappearance was making David even more agitated, though he tried to hide his concern from his family. Around 4 o'clock, Jennifer called me on my private line. Jennifer had been my executive assistant at Meridian for 3 years, and she was one of the few people who knew my real identity. She had been monitoring the situation from our offices in Boston and had disturbing news to report. "Anna, we've been getting calls all morning from Henderson employees," Jennifer said. "Word is spreading through the company that massive layoffs are coming if this deal doesn't happen. People are panicking about losing their jobs right before Christmas." The human cost of my strategy was something I had not fully considered. Henderson employed over 2,000 people across 3 states. These were working families with mortgages and children and dreams that depended on steady paychecks. My desire for revenge against David was affecting innocent people who had nothing to do with his betrayal. "Also," Jennifer continued, "we found something interesting about Sophia Martinez. Her employment records at Henderson show some inconsistencies. It looks like she might be using false identification." This revelation added a new dimension to an already complex situation. If Sophia was not who she claimed to be, then David's affair might be part of a larger conspiracy targeting Henderson Industries. Corporate espionage was a serious federal crime that could destroy more than just my marriage. As evening approached, Patricia made a confession that shattered my remaining illusions about my husband's family. She admitted that she had deliberately introduced David to Sophia at a company holiday party 6 months ago. Patricia had never approved of our marriage and wanted David to find someone who she considered more suitable for her successful son. "I thought if he met someone younger and more ambitious, he would realize what he was missing." Patricia explained, her voice lacking any trace of remorse. "You've always been too quiet, too bookish. David needs a woman who understands his goals." The calculated cruelty of her admission was breathtaking. Patricia had orchestrated my husband's infidelity as part of a deliberate campaign to destroy our marriage. The wine incident was not an isolated act of spite. It was the culmination of months of manipulation designed to drive me away from her son. That night, as David lay sleeping beside me, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being the victim of their schemes. Tomorrow, I would begin fighting back with every resource at my disposal. Dr. Williams confirmed what I already suspected during my morning appointment. The stress from the wine incident had caused concerning spikes in my blood pressure, but the baby remained healthy and strong. She prescribed additional rest and warned me to avoid any situations that might trigger further anxiety. If only she knew that I was about to orchestrate the most stressful situation of my entire life. While I was at the doctor's office, Rachel Martinez from Henderson Industries called my cell phone with information that changed everything I thought I knew about Sophia. Rachel worked in human resources and had been quietly investigating suspicious employee behavior for weeks.
Anna, I hope you don't mind me calling directly,
Rachel said, but I discovered something about David's friend Sophia that you need to know. She's been spreading rumors throughout the company that you've been struggling with fertility issues and that your marriage is falling apart. The cruelty of these lies was staggering. While I had been privately dealing with the emotional pain of David's betrayal, Sophia had been publicly humiliating me to his colleagues. She was painting herself as David's salvation from an unhappy marriage, positioning herself as the woman who truly understood his needs.
There's more, Rachel continued. I ran a background check on Sophia Martinez and her social security number doesn't match her employment application. Either she made a clerical error or she's been working under false identification. Henderson Industries was facing a potential catastrophe that went far beyond the failed Meridian acquisition. If employees were using fraudulent documents, the company could face massive fines and federal investigations. Marcus Thompson had built his reputation on ethical business practices, and this scandal would destroy everything he had worked to achieve. David spent the morning in emergency meetings with Henderson's legal team, trying to understand how Meridian Capital could withdraw from a deal that had seemed certain just 48 hours earlier. The lawyers were asking questions that David could not answer about due diligence procedures and compliance reviews. What David didn't realize was that Meridian's withdrawal was creating opportunities for Henderson's competitors to swoop in with lowball offers. 3 other private equity firms had already contacted Marcus Thompson about acquiring the company at significantly reduced prices. Henderson's employees would likely face massive layoffs, regardless of which buyer ultimately succeeded. Around noon, Patricia's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, called me with information that added another layer to this growing conspiracy. Mrs. Chen had been friends with my mother-in-law for 15 years, but their relationship had become strained over recent financial disagreements.
Anna, dear, I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, Mrs. Chen said hesitantly, but Patricia has been taking money from David's checking accounts without his permission. She borrowed $5,000 from me last month and hasn't paid it back. I think she might have gambling problems. This revelation explained Patricia's increasingly erratic behavior over the past year. She had been pressuring David to make more money and complaining about their family's modest lifestyle compared to other executives' families. If Patricia had been stealing from David to fund gambling addiction, her encouragement of his affair with Sophia might have been motivated by financial desperation rather than simple dislike of me. My college friend Beth drove down from Providence that afternoon to check on me after hearing about the wine incident through social media. Someone had recorded Patricia and Sophia's attack and posted it online, where it had been shared thousands of times with comments expressing outrage about the assault on a pregnant woman.
Anna, this video is everywhere,
Beth said, showing me her phone.
People are calling for boycotts of Henderson Industries. The company's reputation is being destroyed along with David's. The viral video was creating public relations problems that would persist long after the immediate crisis resolved.
Henderson's customers were expressing disgust about the corporate culture that would allow such behavior at official company events. David's professional reputation was being permanently damaged by association with Patricia and Sophia's actions. While Beth and I were having lunch, David's panic reached a new level of desperation. He had finally managed to schedule a phone call with someone claiming to represent Meridian Capital, but the conversation had not gone as he expected.
They're saying they discovered major compliance violations in Henderson's financial reporting,
David told me when he arrived home.
How is that possible? I've been overseeing these numbers for 3 years.
David's confusion was genuine, which meant he had not been deliberately participating in Henderson's accounting fraud. His affair with Sophia had compromised his judgment, but he was not a criminal. This distinction mattered to me more than I wanted to admit, because it meant the man I had fallen in love with might still exist somewhere beneath the layers of deception. Late that afternoon, I received a disturbing phone call from my private investigator, James Rodriguez. James had been monitoring Sophia's activities since I first hired him 3 months ago, and he had discovered connections that extended far beyond simple adultery. "Ms. Anna, we have a serious problem," James said. "Sophia Martinez is actually Sofia Castillo, and she's married to a man named Carlos who lives in Phoenix. She's been running similar operations in 3 other states over the past 2 years. This information transformed David's affair from personal betrayal into something much more sinister. Sophia was apparently a professional con artist who targeted married executives in financially vulnerable companies. Her relationship with David was not about love or even lust. It was about gaining access to confidential information that could be sold to competitors or used for insider trading. Also," James continued, "Carlos has been trying to track down his wife for the past month. He hired a different private investigator in Arizona, and they've been following a trail that leads directly to your husband." The scope of this conspiracy was becoming clear, and David was an unwitting victim rather than a willing participant. Sophia had targeted him specifically because of his position at Henderson Industries and his access to acquisition negotiations. Patricia's role in introducing them was either remarkable bad luck or evidence that the conspiracy reached deeper into David's life than anyone realized. That evening, David's brother Tony discovered Patricia's financial crimes while reviewing family bank statements. Patricia had been forging David's signature on checks and transferring money to online gambling sites for over 6 months. The total amount exceeded $15,000, which qualified as felony theft under state law. "David, Mom has been stealing from you systematically," Tony said during a tense family confrontation in our living room. "These transactions show a pattern of addiction and fraud that could send her to prison." Patricia's response was to blame me for causing stress that drove her to gambling. She claimed that my coldness and lack of appreciation for David's success had created family tensions that required medication through casino visits and online poker games. "If Anna had been a proper wife, none of this would have happened," Patricia declared, her voice shaking with desperation. "David needed support and encouragement, not judgment and criticism." The irony of her accusations was profound, considering that I had been financially supporting their family's lifestyle through my success at Meridian Capital. Every expensive dinner, every luxury vacation, every designer outfit that Patricia wore had been funded indirectly by my business acumen. As I listened to Patricia's desperate lies, I realized that tomorrow would bring the final confrontation. All the pieces were in position for me to reveal the truth about my identity and take control of the situation once and for all. The next morning brought revelations that exceeded even my darkest suspicions about the conspiracy surrounding my family. James Rodriguez arrived at our house before breakfast with a file containing evidence that transformed our personal crisis into something approaching a federal case. "Anna, what we're dealing with is much bigger than your husband's affair," James explained as he spread photographs across our kitchen table. "Sofia Martinez, or Sofia Castillo, or whatever her real name might be, has been running this same operation across multiple states with different mother-in-law conspirators." The photographs showed Sofia with at least 4 other men in cities ranging from Denver to Atlanta. Each target was a married executive in his 30s or 40s, each worked for a company facing potential acquisition, and each had a mother or mother-in-law who had introduced him to Sophia under seemingly innocent circumstances. "The pattern is always the same," James continued. "Sophia seduces the target, extracts confidential information about upcoming deals, and then disappears right before the acquisitions are supposed to close. Someone is making money by trading on this inside information." Patricia's role in this conspiracy was becoming clearer as James explained his investigation.
Her gambling debts were not random addiction. They were deliberate obligations created to force her cooperation with Sophia's schemes. Someone had been paying Patricia to introduce David to Sophia and to create family drama that would destabilize our marriage. Around 10 o'clock, Carlos Castillo arrived from Phoenix with his own private investigator and a stack of legal documents. Carlos was a soft-spoken accountant in his early 40s who had been married to Sophia for 8 years without knowing about her criminal activities in other states.
"I apologize for intruding on your family crisis," Carlos said when David answered the door, "but my wife has been missing for 2 months, and we traced her here through credit card records and social media posts."
David's face turned white as Carlos showed him wedding photographs and legal documents proving Sophia's marriage. The woman David thought he loved was not only using a false identity, but was also committing bigamy by conducting intimate relationships while legally married to another man. Carlos explained that Sophia had told him she was visiting her sick mother in Chicago while she was actually conducting her affair with David in Boston. She had been using a secondary credit card that Carlos didn't know about to fund her elaborate deceptions, staying in expensive hotels and buying designer clothes to maintain her false lifestyle.
"She emptied our savings account 2 days before she disappeared."
Carlos continued, his voice breaking with emotion. $15,000 that we had been saving to start a family. I thought we were happy together. The human cost of Sophia's crimes was becoming apparent as Carlos described his devastation. He was an innocent victim whose life had been destroyed by the same woman who was destroying my marriage. David's affair had created multiple layers of suffering that extended far beyond our immediate family. Henderson Industries was facing its own crisis as news of the accounting irregularities spread through the financial community. Marcus Thompson had been forced to hire forensic accountants to review 3 years of financial statements, and the preliminary results suggested systematic fraud that predated David's involvement with the company. "Someone has been manipulating our revenue reports and hiding debt through subsidiary companies," Marcus told David during an emergency phone call. "The SEC is launching a formal investigation and we might be facing criminal charges." David's panic was reaching levels that concerned me from a medical perspective. His hands were shaking constantly, he couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at a time, and he had developed a nervous stutter when discussing the situation. Part of me wanted to end his suffering by revealing my identity, but I needed to gather more evidence before making my final move. My brother Michael arrived from Boston that afternoon after I called him for emotional support. Michael was a successful attorney who specialized in corporate law, and his presence would be crucial for the legal challenges that were approaching rapidly.
"Anna, you look exhausted,"
Michael said as he hugged me carefully, mindful of my pregnancy. "This stress isn't good for you or the baby. Maybe it's time to consider leaving David until this situation resolves." Michael's suggestion was reasonable from his perspective, but he didn't know about my double life or my plans for revenge. I needed him to believe that I was simply a victim of circumstances rather than an active participant in creating this crisis. Dr. Williams had recommended bed rest after my blood pressure readings continued to climb dangerously high. The pregnancy was now at 36 weeks, and any additional stress could trigger premature labor. The irony was that revealing my identity as Meridian Capital's owner would probably reduce my stress levels significantly, but it would also end my ability to control the situation. Tony spent the afternoon reviewing Patricia's financial records with the help of a forensic accountant he knew from his investment firm. The scope of her theft was even worse than initially suspected, with evidence suggesting she had been stealing from David for over a year through forged checks and unauthorized credit card charges. "Mom owes gambling sites almost $30,000, Tony told David during another explosive family meeting. "She's been using your identity to secure loans and credit cards that you don't even know about. Your credit score has been destroyed.
Patricia's response was to blame Sophia for corrupting her judgment and leading her into financial crimes. She claimed that Sophia had promised her money in exchange for introducing David to her, but the payments had never materialized. "She said David would be happier with someone more sophisticated," Patricia sobbed, her denial finally cracking under the weight of evidence. "She promised me $5,000 if I could break up your marriage." This confession revealed the calculated cruelty behind Patricia's behavior over the past 6 months. Every snide comment, every moment of disrespect, every attempt to undermine my confidence had been purchased by Sophia as part of her elaborate con game. Around 6 o'clock, we received the phone call that changed everything. Carlos's phone rang while he was sitting in our living room, and the caller ID showed Sophia's number. She was finally ready to contact her husband, apparently unaware that he had tracked her to Boston. "Sophia, where have you been?" Carlos answered, putting the call on speaker. "I've been worried sick about you." "I'm fine, baby," Sophia replied, her voice strained. "I had to leave suddenly because of a family emergency. I'll be home in a few days with some good news about our financial situation." The boldness of her lies was stunning as she described fictional problems with her fictional sick mother while sitting in a hotel room paid for with stolen money. She was apparently preparing to return to Phoenix with whatever profits she had gained from her relationship with David. Carlos's next words shattered her composure completely. "Sophia, I'm sitting in David Henderson's living room right now. I know about everything you've been doing here." The silence that followed lasted almost 30 seconds before Sophia hung up the phone. Within minutes, our house phone rang with David's number displayed on the caller ID. Sophia was calling him frantically, but David refused to answer as he stared at Carlos in shock. "She's been playing all of us," David whispered, finally understanding the magnitude of his manipulation. "Everything she told me about her feelings about our future together, it was all lies." That evening, as I lay in bed listening to David weep quietly beside me, I knew that tomorrow would bring the final revelation. All the pieces were in position for me to reclaim control of my life and deliver justice to everyone who had betrayed me. The morning of reckoning arrived with unseasonable warmth for late November, as if the weather itself was preparing for the storm I was about to unleash. I had spent the entire night awake not from pregnancy discomfort, but from anticipation of the confrontation that would finally expose every lie and deception that had poisoned my marriage. I called David at 7 o'clock and asked him to arrange an emergency family meeting at our house for 11 o'clock. I wanted Patricia, Tony, Michael, and Carlos present as witnesses to what I was about to reveal. David agreed without question, probably hoping that a family intervention might somehow salvage his crumbling world. Jennifer had driven down from Boston with 3 boxes of legal documents, financial records, and corporate filings that would prove my identity as Meridian Capital's owner. She also brought Marcus Thompson, Henderson Industries' CEO, whom I had secretly contacted the previous evening to arrange his presence at the meeting. "Anna, are you absolutely certain you want to do this?" Jennifer asked as we arranged the documents on my dining room table. "Once you reveal your identity, there's no going back to your old life." My old life ended the moment Sophia poured wine on my pregnant belly, I replied, feeling calmer than I had in months. "It's time for everyone to learn who they've been dealing with." Marcus Thompson arrived first, looking confused and anxious about why Meridian Capital's mysterious owner had summoned him to what appeared to be a suburban family home. He had been told only that critical information about the Henderson acquisition would be revealed at this location. Patricia and Tony arrived together at exactly 11 o'clock, followed immediately by David and Carlos. Michael had positioned himself near the door with a digital recorder ready to document everything that was about to unfold. "I've asked you all here because it's time to end the lies and deceptions that have been destroying multiple families." I began standing slowly from my chair despite my advanced pregnancy.
What I'm about to tell you will shock everyone in this room except Jennifer. I walked to the dining room table and picked up the first document, a corporate filing from the Massachusetts Secretary of State, showing the ownership structure of Meridian Capital Corporation. David, you've been working for 8 months to negotiate a $6.4 billion acquisition deal with Meridian Capital. I continued watching his face carefully. You've been frustrated by your inability to meet with the company's owner because that person has been deliberately avoiding you. David's confusion was evident as he shook his head. Anna, what does this have to do with our family crisis? I don't understand why Marcus is here. Marcus is here because he's about to meet the owner of Meridian Capital for the first time, I replied, holding up the document. My name is Anna Marie Thompson, and I am the sole owner of Meridian Capital Corporation, which was established 8 years ago with funds from my father's estate. The silence that followed was absolute. David stared at me as if I had announced that I was from another planet. Patricia's mouth opened and closed without producing any sound. Marcus Thompson dropped the coffee cup he had been holding, sending ceramic fragments across our hardwood floor. That's impossible, David whispered, his voice barely audible. You're a part-time consultant. You don't have the education or experience to run a major corporation. I handed him my MBA diploma from MIT, followed by documentation showing my role in 17 major acquisitions over the past 5 years. Jennifer opened her laptop and displayed Meridian Capital's website with my photograph prominently featured on the leadership page. I've been testing you for 8 months, David, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each revelation. I wanted to see if you could conduct an honest business negotiation with my company while maintaining honesty in our marriage. You failed both tests. Tony was the first to find his voice. Anna, if this is true, then you've been deliberately sabotaging David's career. Why would you do this to your own husband? Because 3 months ago, I discovered that David was having an affair with Sophia Martinez, sharing confidential Henderson Industries information with her, and lying to me every single day about where he was spending his evenings. I replied, producing James Rodriguez's investigation file. I spread the surveillance photographs across the table, showing David and Sophia at restaurants, hotels, and business meetings. Patricia gasped as she recognized the images, finally understanding that her scheme had been exposed completely. Patricia, would you like to explain to David how you deliberately introduced him to Sophia as part of a plan to destroy our marriage? I asked, watching her face turn pale with shock. I don't know what you're talking about, Patricia stammered, but her denial lacked conviction. Then perhaps you'd like to explain these bank records showing that you've been stealing from David's accounts to fund gambling debts. I continued, handing David the financial documents that Tony had discovered. Or maybe you'd prefer to discuss the $15,000 that Sophia promised to pay you for breaking up our marriage. David stared at the evidence of his mother's betrayal with an expression of complete devastation. The woman he had trusted his entire life had been systematically destroying his marriage for money while encouraging him to commit adultery. Marcus Thompson had recovered enough from his shock to study the Meridian Capital documents carefully. Anna, if you own Meridian Capital, then you could have completed this acquisition at any time. Why did you withdraw from the deal? Because I discovered that Henderson Industries has been committing accounting fraud for 3 years, I replied, handing him the forensic audit reports. Your CFO has been inflating revenue and hiding debt through subsidiary companies. I couldn't risk Meridian's reputation by acquiring a company facing potential SEC sanctions. This revelation stunned Marcus into silence. He had been running Henderson Industries for 12 years without knowing that his CFO was committing crimes that could destroy the company and send him to prison. Carlos had been listening to these revelations with growing understanding of how Sophia had targeted David specifically. Anna, did Sophia know that you owned Meridian Capital when she began her affair with David? I don't think so, I replied, but someone was feeding her information about potential acquisition targets. She's been running this same con game in multiple states, always targeting married executives whose companies are facing buyouts. I pulled out my phone and played the recording I had made of the wine incident 2 nights earlier. Patricia's voice was clearly audible, instructing me to endure this like a good wife, while Sophia laughed about humiliating a pregnant woman. This recording has been viewed over 2 million times on social media, I announced, watching Patricia's face turn white with horror. Henderson Industries is facing a public relations catastrophe because of your behavior at a company event. David collapsed into a chair as the full scope of his mother's betrayal became clear. "Mom, you destroyed everything," he whispered. "My marriage, my career, my reputation, everything I worked for." "I was trying to help you find happiness," Patricia protested weakly. "Anna was never right for you. You needed someone more ambitious." "I needed a mother who loved me enough to support my choices," David replied, his voice breaking with emotion. "Instead, I got a criminal who stole from me to fund her gambling addiction." The doorbell rang at that moment, and Michael answered it to find 2 FBI agents standing on our front porch. I had called them the previous evening after Carlos confirmed Sophia's multi-state criminal activities. "We're looking for Sofia Martinez, also known as Sofia Castillo," Agent Sarah Davis announced as she entered our living room. "We have warrants for her arrest on charges of fraud, identity theft, and interstate conspiracy." Patricia fainted at the mention of federal charges, collapsing onto our sofa as the reality of her situation became clear. She was not just facing theft charges for stealing from David, she was potentially an accessory to federal crimes that could result in decades in prison. Agent Davis explained that Sophia had been captured that morning attempting to board a flight to Mexico City with $50,000 in cash and jewelry that belonged to various victims across multiple states. She was being held without bail pending extradition hearings in 4 different jurisdictions. "Mrs. Henderson, we'll need to question you about your relationship with the defendant," Agent Davis told Patricia. "Your cooperation could influence the charges you face for your role in this conspiracy." As the FBI agents prepared to escort Patricia downtown for questioning, David turned to me with tears streaming down his face. "Anna, I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said quietly. "I betrayed everything we built together. But please, can you find some way to save Henderson Industries? 2,000 innocent people are going to lose their jobs because of my stupidity." Looking at my husband's broken face, I realized that my revenge was complete. Patricia was facing federal charges. Sophia was in custody. David's career was destroyed, and I had demonstrated my power over everyone who had underestimated me. But David's plea for his co-workers reminded me that real strength comes from mercy, not vengeance. The next phase of this crisis would test whether I was truly the person my father had raised me to be. The FBI's arrest of Patricia on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud sent shockwaves through our entire community that extended far beyond our family's personal drama. By evening, local news stations were reporting on the connection between a suburban grandmother's gambling addiction and a multi-state criminal enterprise that had defrauded dozens of executives and their families. Patricia was denied bail due to flight risk concerns, as Sophia's attempted escape to Mexico suggested that the conspiracy had international connections. Agent Davis explained that Patricia's cooperation would be essential for building cases against other participants in what appeared to be a sophisticated organized crime operation. David's emotional breakdown that afternoon was both heartbreaking and necessary for his eventual recovery. For the first time since I had known him, he took complete responsibility for his choices without making excuses or blaming external circumstances. His affair with Sophia had not been a moment of weakness. It had been a series of deliberate decisions that betrayed our marriage vows and his professional ethics. "Anna, I need to tell you everything," David said as we sat alone in our living room after the FBI agents had left with Patricia. I wasn't just sharing Henderson Industries information with Sophia accidentally. She asked me specific questions about upcoming deals, and I answered them because I wanted to impress her. This confession confirmed my suspicions that David had been an active participant in corporate espionage, even if he hadn't understood the criminal implications of his actions. His desire to appear sophisticated and successful to his young mistress had led him to commit federal crimes that could result in prison time.
I know you'll never forgive me,
David continued, his voice breaking with genuine remorse. But I'm begging you to help save Henderson Industries. Marcus Thompson is a good man who's never done anything wrong. The 2,000 people who work there don't deserve to lose their jobs because of my betrayal. David's plea forced me to confront the moral complexity of my situation. My original plan for revenge had focused solely on punishing the people who had hurt me, without considering the broader consequences for innocent families who depended on Henderson Industries for their livelihoods. Sophia's arrest had been captured on security cameras at Logan Airport, and the footage was being broadcast on national news programs as an example of white-collar crime targeting American businesses. Her mugshot showed a woman who looked nothing like the confident, manipulative person who had poured wine on my pregnant belly. Federal custody had stripped away her artificial glamour, revealing someone who appeared frightened and desperate. Carlos had decided to return to Phoenix immediately to begin divorce proceedings and rebuild his life. Before leaving, he provided additional evidence about Sophia's criminal activities, including documentation of forged documents and stolen money that would strengthen the federal case against her.
I hope you can find some peace in all this,
Carlos told me as he prepared to leave. Sophia destroyed both our marriages, but at least now she can't hurt anyone else. Marcus Thompson spent the evening reviewing the forensic audit results with his legal team, finally understanding the scope of the accounting fraud that had been hidden from him by his CFO. The deliberate manipulation of financial records had created a corporate crisis that threatened the company's survival regardless of any acquisition deals. Anna, if Meridian Capital is willing to reconsider the acquisition under modified terms, we might be able to save most of the jobs, Marcus said during a conference call with Jennifer, but we'll need to restructure the entire leadership team and implement new oversight procedures. I spent that night weighing the moral implications of various options available to me. I could walk away from Henderson Industries, completely allowing the company to collapse and taking satisfaction in David's professional destruction. I could proceed with the acquisition on terms favorable to Meridian, essentially buying David's company at a discount while minimizing my personal losses. Or I could find a way to save Henderson Industries that would protect innocent employees while still ensuring accountability for the crimes that had been committed. By morning, I had made a decision that would surprise everyone who thought they understood my motivations. I called Jennifer and instructed her to prepare a revised acquisition proposal that would restructure Henderson Industries as an employee-owned cooperative rather than a traditional corporate acquisition. Meridian Capital would provide the financial backing and expertise needed to implement the transition, but the employees would ultimately control their own destiny. "This is highly unusual, Anna," Jennifer said when I explained the proposal. "You're essentially giving up majority control of a $6 billion deal to benefit people who have no legal claim to ownership. My father always told me that the measure of success is not how much money you make, but how many people you help along the way," I replied. This is my chance to prove that I learned his lessons. The employee ownership structure would protect Henderson's workforce from future acquisitions, while ensuring that the profits from their labor would benefit them directly rather than distant shareholders. It would also create a model for ethical business practices that could influence other companies facing similar challenges. David's reaction to my decision was gratitude mixed with amazement that I could show such generosity after everything he had done to betray me. He was still facing potential criminal charges for his role in the corporate espionage,
but the employee ownership plan would allow him to make amends through community service rather than prison time. Tony had been working with forensic accountants to calculate the full extent of Patricia's theft from David's accounts. The total exceeded $25,000, not including the damage to David's credit score from unauthorized loans and credit cards. Patricia would be required to make full restitution as part of any plea agreement with federal prosecutors. Around noon, Dr. Williams called with concerning news about my latest blood pressure readings. The stress of recent events had triggered early labor symptoms, and she wanted me to check into the hospital immediately for monitoring and possible delivery.
Anna, you're at 37 weeks now, which is technically full term, Dr. Williams explained, but your blood pressure is dangerously high, and we need to consider immediate delivery to protect both you and the baby.
As Jennifer drove me to the hospital, I realized that my daughter would be born during the most transformative week of my life. She would enter a world where her mother had finally claimed her true identity, and her father had learned the difference between success and integrity. David met us at the hospital, his face showing genuine concern for my welfare despite everything that had happened between us. Whatever our future relationship might become, we would always be connected through our child, and I wanted her to grow up understanding that redemption is possible for people who are willing to change. 6 hours later, Grace Elizabeth Thompson Henderson was born healthy and beautiful, weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces. As I held her for the first time, I knew that every decision I had made over the past week had been preparation for this moment when I would take responsibility for shaping the next generation. The news media had assembled outside the hospital to cover the birth of Meridian Capital owner Anna Thompson's daughter, but I declined all interviews. This was a private moment that belonged to our family, not to the public fascination with our dramatic story. David cried when he held Grace for the first time, whispering promises about becoming the father she deserved, despite his failures as a husband. Whether our marriage could survive the betrayals of the past year remained unclear, but our shared commitment to Grace's welfare would provide a foundation for whatever relationship we built going forward. 6 months after Grace was born, I stood in the renovated Henderson Industries headquarters, watching 2,000 employees vote to approve their transition to cooperative ownership. The transformation had taken months of legal work, financial restructuring, and employee education, but the result was a company that truly belonged to the people who made it successful. David had spent those months in intensive therapy working to understand how his need for external validation had led him to betray everything he claimed to value. His therapist, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, helped him recognize that his affair with Sophia had been motivated by insecurity rather than genuine attraction or love. I spent my entire life trying to prove that I was worthy of my mother's approval, David told me during one of our weekly co-parenting meetings. When Sophia made me feel important and successful, I convinced myself that what we had was real. David's recognition of his psychological patterns was encouraging, but rebuilding trust would require years of consistent behavior rather than months of good intentions. For now, we were focused on creating a stable environment for Grace while we figured out whether our marriage could survive such fundamental betrayal. Patricia had been sentenced to 18 months in federal minimum security prison, followed by 3 years of probation and mandatory participation in gambling addiction treatment programs. Her cooperation with federal investigators had helped convict 3 other participants in Sophia's multi-state conspiracy, including the criminal mastermind who had recruited vulnerable women to seduce targeted executives. I never understood how much damage I was causing, Patricia wrote in a letter she sent me from prison. I was so focused on my own problems that I didn't consider how my actions would hurt David, you, or Grace. I hope someday you can forgive me for the pain I caused. Sophia had been sentenced to 5 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to charges in 4 states.
Carlos had successfully divorced her and was rebuilding his life in Phoenix with support from a victim counseling program. He sent periodic updates about his progress, and I was pleased to learn that he had found employment with a firm that specialized in helping fraud victims recover their losses. The Grace Foundation had become my primary focus outside of my responsibilities at Meridian Capital. We provided emergency financial assistance, legal support, and counseling services to pregnant women facing domestic abuse, workplace harassment, or family betrayal. The foundation had already helped over 300 women escape dangerous situations and rebuild their lives with dignity. "What you're doing here is changing lives in ways that will ripple through generations," said Dr. Sarah Johnson, the foundation's director of counseling services. "These women are learning that they have more power than they realized, just like you did." Henderson Industries had become a model for ethical business practices under its cooperative ownership structure. The company's productivity had increased 20% since the transition, and employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvements in workplace morale and job security. Marcus Thompson remained as CEO, but now reported to an employee-elected board of directors rather than distant shareholders. David had found meaningful work as a business consultant, helping other companies transition to employee ownership models. His experience with the Henderson transformation had given him unique insights into the challenges and benefits of cooperative structures. He was earning significantly less money than his previous position, but he seemed genuinely happier and more fulfilled by work that aligned with his values. "I'm learning that success isn't about how much money you make or how many people report to you," David told me during one of our conversations. "It's about whether you can look at yourself in the mirror and respect the person looking back at you." David's transformation was encouraging, but I remained cautious about the possibility of reconciliation. Trust once broken could only be rebuilt through consistent actions over extended periods of time. Grace deserved parents who could model healthy relationships whether together or apart. My pregnancy experience had taught me that I was stronger than I had ever imagined, but also that strength without wisdom could be destructive rather than constructive. The power to destroy David's life had been satisfying momentarily, but the power to transform Henderson Industries into something better had provided lasting fulfillment. Tony had become an unexpected ally in helping David understand the importance of accountability and genuine change. As someone who had witnessed their mother's destructive behavior firsthand, Tony could provide perspective that David needed to hear from someone who loved him unconditionally. "David Anna didn't have to save Henderson Industries," Tony reminded his brother during family dinners. "She could have walked away and let everyone suffer the consequences of your choices. The fact that she chose mercy over vengeance shows you the kind of person you married." Grace was developing her own personality as she grew, showing signs of both David's determination and my analytical thinking. Watching her explore the world with fearless curiosity reminded me that redemption was always possible for people willing to change and grow. Jennifer had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer of Meridian Capital, allowing me to focus more attention on family and philanthropic activities. The company continued to grow under our shared leadership, but I had learned to prioritize personal relationships over professional achievements. "You've created something remarkable here," Jennifer told me as we reviewed the foundation's annual report. "But the most important thing you've created is a daughter who will grow up understanding that power should be used to help others rather than harm them." Dr. Williams had been following Grace's development carefully, ensuring that the stress of my pregnancy had not caused any long-term health problems. Grace was meeting all her developmental milestones ahead of schedule, and her bright smile suggested that she had inherited the best qualities from both her parents. As I looked toward the future, I felt optimistic about the possibilities ahead for our complicated family.
David was working to earn a second chance through consistent actions rather than empty promises. Grace was growing up surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally. The foundation was helping other women find their own strength and independence. Most importantly, I had learned that true power comes from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. The wine incident that had seemed so devastating 6 months ago had ultimately led to positive changes that would benefit thousands of people for years to come. My father had always taught me that challenges reveal character rather than create it. The betrayals I had faced had shown me that I was capable of both revenge and redemption, and I had chosen the path that would make him proud. Grace's first word was "Mama," and hearing her voice reminded me that every decision I made would influence the woman she would become someday. I wanted her to inherit a legacy of strength, compassion, and integrity that would guide her through whatever challenges life might bring. The future remained uncertain in many ways, but I faced it with confidence that I could handle whatever obstacles appeared ahead. I had discovered my own power, used it wisely, and created opportunities for others to discover theirs. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone underestimated your strength or capabilities? How did you handle it, and what did you learn about yourself in the process? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for following Grace's and my journey through this challenging time in our lives. I hope our story reminds you that you have more power than you might realize, and that the best revenge is often living well and helping others do the same. Please, like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's challenges, and share this with anyone who might need to be reminded of their own inner strength. Until next time, remember that every ending is also a new beginning, and you get to choose what you build with the pieces that remain.